Sziasztok! Ez a Kiút sorozat. Ez egy bizonyság és kijelentés gyűjtemény, amely segíthet neked a saját gyógyulási folyamatodban. Ez egy online képzés az elmemegújításról, belső gyógyulásról az eddig megtett utam alapján. Ez nem egy párlépéses program, csupán bátorítás és eszközök egy kiúton lévőtől más kiúton lévőknek, vagy éppen kiútra lépőknek. Hiszem, hogy ami nekem fordulópont volt a helyreállás folyamatában, az neked is az lesz. Jó kiutat mindenkinek!
Hi! As I promised to you, I'm gonna go through all the stories of my life regarding inner healing. And I'm gonna start with my early childhood and all the things that happened around my conception. And I don't want you to feel the burden of it. I'm free of those happenings and I don't feel weighed down when I talk about them, and I don't want you to feel the burden of it either. So I just share those stories to make you realize some of the things that the enemy tried to do the same way in your life as well. And I don't want you to feel sorry for me or to feel responsible for what has happened to me in any way. I think it's a great tool when we realize when we started to believe a certain life for the first time. So it's great when the Holy Spirit leads you to realize that, oh, this thing happened to me when I was a child, and since that point I started to agree with that lie that I'm not valuable, I'm not worthy, I should be ashamed of myself, and so on. But I think it can be harmful when we use those realizations to justify our captivity. What I mean by that is that many times I meet Christians who are obsessed with psychology and inner healing, and they always share the latest realizations, like, oh, I can't accept the love of the Father because my father was like that. I can't enjoy myself among people because there was a trauma that happened to me when I was 4 years old on that summer day, and so on. And the Holy Spirit showed me that it is going on with me because of that event, and that's it. That's what I realized. How cool is that? And actually, just the realization itself is not that much cool. In case you use that realization to disassociate from what has happened to you, or what you started to believe when that happened to you, then it's cool. So for example, I started to believe that I'm not able to connect with people because I was never accepted among other kids when I was in the kindergarten, and no one approached me to play with me and things like that, and that's why I don't really feel comfortable among people. It can be true, but even if it is true, if I say that, oh, this is why I can't, so I'm gonna stay in that prison for a few more other years and decades, so you can use these realizations to justify your pain and your suffering, and to say that what has happened to me will really define who I am and who I will be. And it's extremely destructive. It's worse than not even realizing the connection between what has happened to you and the destructive thought pattern that is in your brain. However, it can be very helpful to realize those connections if you see that, okay, the way I react to people and the shame and the protective mechanisms that are going on when I meet people and communicate with people happens because I started to believe as a child that I won't enjoy myself with people and they won't accept me and love me. And why do I believe it? I'm a new creation now. Like, Jesus has died to save me from that thought pattern. I am free not to think like that. And I started to believe that lie, that I'm not worthy, and that's why people won't treat me like that. But here's the point, I'm free not to agree with that lie anymore. And because I'm worthy and I'm lovable, then the next time I'm gonna communicate with people, I'm gonna think about myself like that. And I'm gonna teach myself this truth. Because if I was able to teach myself that lie, that I'm not worthy to be treated well, then I can teach myself the truth that I'm worthy to be treated well. So you can use those realizations for your way out, but you can also use those realizations of the connection between what has happened to you and the thought pattern to justify your pain and to build another grid in your prison cell. And I'm gonna start with my family and how my life started. My parents were Christians at the time. They got married. They were very poor. They didn't have a flat. They didn't have anything. I was conceived when they were just a few months married, and I was a surprise, but not that positive one. Like they wanted me like way later, and they were kind of happy, but they weren't actually, and it was hard for them. And when I was born, it was a joy for them, but also a lot of struggle. And my mother was very close to mental breakdown many times when I was a young kid. I was crying all the time with no reason at all. My father went to work without sleeping a bit. So they were just surviving. And yeah, they were happy for me, but I don't think they felt that happiness. So they tell me that they were happy, but actually they weren't really, because they just tried to survive. They tried to do their best and they cared for me, but my whole early childhood happened in the atmosphere of total chaos and depression and surviving mechanisms. And I think it can be useful to look back to what has happened to us, because I believe that what is described in Revelation, that the dragon is after the mother and her son, I think it's a description of us as well. It can mean a lot of things. I'm not going in there, but I think it's a story of us. Like, I think the enemy somehow has some idea of what we are called to do and what we are created for, and he comes after us right the time when we are born, right when we are little children, and tries to plant his seeds, tries to plant his destructive thought mechanisms into us, and tries to create events that make us believe those lies. He is very precise about building up the very strongholds in our brains that can prevent us to live the life that we are created for. So that's what happened to me. There were continuous quarrel in the family. Yeah, they were barely surviving. And then we moved to a little village, and there was like no tap water, no, the electricity was applied in the street the first time when my parents moved there. So basically they paid for the electricity to be taken into the street we were living in at that time. So we were extremely poor, and we didn't even have friends. I didn't see other kids my whole early childhood. Like, I was alone a lot, and I was afraid of everyone. I was afraid of my relatives. If they came to our house, I remember always hiding under the bed or pretending that I was asleep to avoid contact with them. So it was tough. And somehow I learned that I can't do what everyone else can do. I can't buy those things, I can't have the same things, I can't wear the same clothes. I just can't. And it wasn't that traumatic as a kid because it was natural for me. What was interesting is the way I was thinking later, because when I made the choices as an adult, many times I didn't dare to enter doors that were completely open, and I didn't dare to use the opportunities that I had, because I learned that I'm not allowed to do what everyone else is allowed to do because I'm somehow less than them and I can't do those things. Yes, so it was that time when the enemy was really intentional about planting lies in my head. And what I need to tell you as an interruption, I will continue the story later, is that there is a connection between what has happened to you and what kind of lies you believe, or what kind of destructive thought pattern you have in your brain. But this link is not that direct. And what I mean by that is many times it is easier to believe a lie when there is an event behind it. Like, when you have a big trauma of abuse, you are more likely to believe that you are worthless, that you should be ashamed of yourself and things like that. But the enemy actually doesn't need an event or trauma to build up a structure of lies in your head. Many times I met kids who had crazy abusive parents, like alcoholic father who beat his family and things like that. And those kids were healthier than I was. And I had a loving, caring family. Many times we hear of people who are born in the best families, they receive perfect, pure opportunities, education. Everyone expects them to save the world, and then all of a sudden they have a mental breakdown or they commit suicide. And I know there's a spiritual side to it, and there is a genetic side to it. I'm not talking about those sides. I'm talking about the side that you are actually free to believe lies that come from thin air. Like, you can build a structure of a serious mental issue while brushing your teeth. Like, you don't need a trauma to agree with the enemy. And I can observe this on many occasions in my life. Like, I remember I was about to become, I was about to celebrate my 4th birthday, and my parents told me that, Avi, you will be 4 tomorrow, it's your last day being 3. And I was like, oh no, I can't believe that I lived that long. And I ran off to the sofa, and I remember it was very fluffy and ugly, and I was thinking, I wish I never get there. I wish I never lived that long. I wish I would die before becoming 4 years old. And I don't know how I came up with this idea. Like, it just doesn't make sense. My parents were kind of depressive and poor, and have had this mindset of, oh, we cannot do anything, we can't afford, we are just less than anybody. But this thought couldn't come from them, at least directly, because they were still loving and caring for me and supporting me the best they could. So this thought of I want to die at 4 is not really logical. So I think we should be careful with making connections between happenings and destructive thought patterns. It can be the starting point. It's way much more likely that you believe lies if you have an event that seem to prove it. But you can allow the enemy to build up those negative structures in your brain without any event, without any trauma. And that's why I think it's very important to notice that the way out is about stopping the blame game. I mean, you can think about like what others did to you, and that's why you feel so neglected and abused, and you can justify your pain and negative thought patterns with what others have done wrong. And you might be true, you might be right about it, because they were really unfair, and it's okay to admit that what has happened to you was not fair and wasn't what you deserve. But blaming others for what happened to you is not the way out. What is not the way out as well, what is not the way out either, is to blame yourself. Then I was the one who agreed with those lies. Yes, it's true. It was me who agreed with those lies. I couldn't do any better. No one taught me otherwise. Like, there was no other option available for me. At least I didn't know about it. So I'm not to blame. And it's the same with others. They did the best they could. They taught me depression. They taught me low self-esteem, but that's the best they could do. They had a low view on themselves, like, how could they teach me something better than what they thought about themselves? And the other thing is, stop blaming God. He was there. He could have prevented it. He didn't do it. He didn't do it. What happened? And I don't know what happened. I know God is not to blame for it. I know I'm not to blame for it. I know that what others have done to me is not to blame for it. The way out is completely quitting blame shifting. Just get out of it as if it wasn't an option to blame anyone. And you can justify your pain with blaming anyone, including yourself. But it's not the way out, it's the other way. And with all the goodwill of my heart, I advise you not to go there, because I've been there and it wasn't fun. Yeah, so I continue with the story. I went to kindergarten, and it was a trauma for me. Like, there were other kids. It was a shock. I haven't seen other people. Like, we lived in a very isolated place, and it was not an option to see friends every day or every month or every year. So only people I knew were my parents and grandparents, I think. And I was so afraid of all the kindergarten teachers, all the other kids. I never played. I never dared to do anything. I was just crying, and I was just sitting there and waiting for the end of the day. And yeah, it was horrible for me. I hated all of it. The best thing in kindergarten was when I felt like I started to have a high temperature, and then I was happy because I knew I was getting sick, and then I can stay at home. That was the joy of that time. And I was really excited about it. Like, oh, I feel so sick. Oh, great. And I don't need to go to kindergarten for a week. And one thing is to have these thoughts of feeling neglected, feeling alone, feeling like I can't do the things that others can do. And the other thing is to connect those feelings with my identity. And that is what is really dangerous. I started to believe that others don't play with me because I'm not worth it. I can't do things that everyone else can do because I'm not good enough for that. I can't enjoy things because I'm not good enough a human being for that. So I started to connect those things, and soon I came up with the idea that I'm less than a human being. I'm some junk product that somehow happens on God's conveyor belt, and I should have been thrown away, but still I wouldn't cast out, and I need to survive this way somehow. So I went into survival mode, and I was just feeling like I need to live another day and another day, and I know I shouldn't be alive, but I am, and I somehow need to make through another day. My parents kind of helped this way of thinking. They didn't tell me those things, but they had this depressive approach to life, so they didn't exactly deny those thoughts. Sometimes they even confirm that. So they are not to blame for this thinking pattern in my brain, but it can be related to my family, and I won't question it. So many times what I believed can be connected to my family and how my parents acted, but most of the lies actually were things that I came up with on my own, and quite surprisingly, because my situation wasn't as bad as the way I was twisted. It was a shock to realize later, when I was in my 20s, still I am, that the only people I can really relate to are those with serious sexual abuse. Like, people with hard sexual abuse history have the same shame and low self-worth based thoughts, and the same thought patterns that I have, and it was quite a shock because nothing like that happened to me, like nothing even similar to that, and still I was as twisted in my thinking as they were. So yeah, as I said before, there is not a direct link between what has happened to you and how twisted your thinking became. I wasn't really enjoying kindergarten years because all those creative tasks were not for me. Like, I was very creative at home. I was painting and drawing a lot, and now I can make a good use of it. But back at this point, I didn't know what to do with it. I loved creating stuff, and I was making furniture and clothes for my dolls. I never played with them, I just made them. But in the kindergarten, when the teachers gave me a task, something creative, I could never do well. I was always like behind the others. And I was happy when I started school, because that I was really appreciated if I'd done something well. So because of all this neglect I was feeling, and I had a lot of like resentment and a lot of suppressed anger in me, and I was a good kid, like the example kid who is really good and never makes big troubles. But time to time I have beaten some kids in the kindergarten, like really bad, because I felt so desperate. I had to drain my aggression some way, and that's what happened. And no one actually found it out somehow. So it was a bit strange. Because otherwise I was like really helpful and kind to everyone, and I was just trying not to take up too much space. I was just trying to be small, and I tried to avoid being recognized. I remember I was hating kindergarten so much. I tried to escape many times. I was hiding. I tried to avoid any group things, any like exercises. Yes. And when I was at school, I was really appreciated because I studied very well, and I was talented in most of the things at school, and the teachers really adored me and appreciated me, and they were kind to me, and I was really enjoying that, and it started to build up another addiction in me. That was the addiction to performance, because I found out that the only way I can feel acceptance and love is when I overachieve, when I am the best. So I really went into being the best so that I could get some kind of acknowledgement and love. My parents loved me. It wasn't that they were beating me at home or like shouting with me all the time, but it wasn't enough for me, obviously. And the only way I could have the love of a group or love of a someone in authority was to overachieve, and that's when I started to really take up the burden of being the best. I need to be the best to compensate for not being a good enough a human being. I felt like I need to somehow do things extraordinarily well so that I can make up for all the things I'm a mess in. I can't play with kids, I can't communicate with kids, I can't enjoy myself among people, I'm not good at sports, I'm not good at any community thing. So I need to find a way to prove that I'm worthy to stay alive. That was basically the concept. Of course, it was unconscious. I didn't think that, but I was reacting like that. I just only thing I was conscious of is that urge that that's the only way for me to live, is to be the best. And everyone was happy. I was the example kid. My parents were happy. I had the best grades at school. Everyone was clapping, good holy kid, never wanting to party, never wanting to have boyfriends, never doing anything wrong, good church girl. And I know you can behave like that if you are so full of love and so full of the Holy Spirit that these are the fruits of your satisfaction in God. I know it's an option, and it can look the same as performance and overcompensation. And I know that it is quite dangerous if a kid is that good. Like, as a parent, I would really look into the issue if my kid was that good. Like, I never broke a bone, I never did anything like adventurous or risky, and I think it's the most unhealthy thing a kid could do. And so I really question whether it's healthy for a kid to be that good and that holy. It is good if it comes from the inside, but if the child tries to suppress everything in themselves so that they can give the performance of it, then it's really terrible. And yes, that's what I have done. And I was surprisingly good at performing. And I always felt I was faking it, because I knew that it wasn't the real me. I had to strive myself into this best girl in the city character. So yes, it was quite a hard thing, even though if I could connect with my life better at school than in kindergarten, I still couldn't connect with people really. My parents never allowed me to watch TV, so I could never talk about things with my classmates. I could never relate to them. I was still the outsider, and I learned that I will always be the outcast. I'm not worthy to hang out with, so I wasn't really offended at it, because I thought that's what I was worth. Like that's what I deserved. So I wasn't even offended at it. That's how you treat someone who is less than a human, and they were treating me right. And the other thing is that I believe that there is such a thing as aura, or there is a sphere of like influence, or there is an atmosphere around each person. And I think that this aura thing really exists. I don't say that the same way the esoteric people say it exists, but I know it's real, because I had this atmosphere of low self-worth, and please treat me bad and beat me every way you can around me. And because I believe that I'm not worthy to anything, then I started to react to people like that. And because I reacted, like I was always like retreating and not reacting and not daring to speak up, then the others reacted to me based on my reaction, and this spiral went down. And you know, you believe what you experience. And I believed that I'm not worthy, and then I started to experience that I'm not worthy to be played with. And then I started to believe that I'm not worthy even more, which made me experience it even more. So it's an ender spiral, and I was going down on it. And the funny thing is that we believe that because we perceive it is true, it is true, but we don't realize that we perceive it because we first believed it. And if we stop believing it first, then all the other factors in the spiral won't happen, won't contribute. So I think there's a natural way of, like, if I always react based on what I believe a certain way, then the others will adjust to it. Like, as I mentioned before, if I believe that I'm not worthy to speak up, after a while the others won't even let me to speak up. But it's kind of a natural psychological understanding of it. But I think there is a more mystical one. Like, I think if you have this atmosphere of brokenness around you, unconsciously the people will react to that, especially if they also have a sphere of brokenness around them, and those brokenness atmospheres match, and they are happy to find each other, and they are happy to destroy each other and make each other even more broken. So many times it happened that I wasn't reacting anything. I wasn't putting this spiral into motion. I just had this something about me that made people treat me as if I wasn't worthy to hang out with, to play with, to talk to. So there were many times when I was contributing to this spiral, and there were a lot of times when out of thin air people started to treat me the way I was thinking about myself, and somehow people can perceive it, and I think most of the time it's completely unconscious. Like, they don't even know why they have done what they've done to you. Somehow they felt compelled to do so, and it is, I think, because of this atmosphere we have around us, which is made out of all the feelings and thoughts we have. I think we can get even spiritual, we can more spiritual if we can describe it as all the spirits we communicate with. If we always have fellowship with the spirit of depression and anger, that's gonna be our atmosphere. If we always communicate with the spirit of freedom and life, then that's what we will have around us. And I think that was happened to me as well. And this is a part of why I can't really blame a lot of people who haven't treated me that well, including my parents, because it's really hard to find out who is to blame in those situations, and most of the time it's pointless to find it out, because almost everyone is to blame and no one to blame at the same time. The good news about that is that you are free to think differently than what the enemy tried to teach you, or has been trying to teach you since you were little. So the turning point for me was when I realized, like, okay, I don't feel comfortable around people because the enemy tried to make me think like that when I was 2, and I've never thought differently. But here I am, I'm a new creation in Christ. I am free not to agree with this lie, and I'm free not to make the first step of this spiral that takes me down. And first, it feels hard to resist this thought pattern of your whole life, basically, many times, or of a few years. So first, it really feels like a struggle, not because you are wired for this bad thinking pattern. You are absolutely wired for love and peace and enjoyment. So that's your natural setup. However, if you really make yourself used to those negative thoughts, then you feel familiar and natural thinking them. Somehow your brain even gets addicted to those thoughts and shout out for it, to you to have them again. There are some really good brain scientists who can tell you all the scientific background to it, and there are great experiments about and researches about that. So it's scientifically completely backed. Yes, so first it will feel unnatural to stop when you have this thought pattern activated again and say, okay, I'm gonna, in my case, I'm gonna have fun with those people because I'm free to think about myself as someone who enjoys the company of others, because I have been made set free, so I'm free to communicate with them and tell jokes and be free because I am worthy, because I am a real human being, because I am worthy to be alive. And so we need to understand that if we were able to create that spiral of negative thoughts, you are able to create a spiral that is going upwards. You are able to rewrite your brain, you are able to build up another structure in your brain, and after a while it will feel very comfortable. Now you feel more familiar. It can be that you feel more familiar with your lies and bad thinking habits because you are used to it, because you've spent years in it. But it's funny because it's funny when you start to get over it and rewrite your thinking patterns, then you realize that actually it's way easier to think the positive thoughts. It's way easier to feel loved and worthy and lovable. So it's true that if you are really used to negative thoughts, then it will feel very unnatural to think positively. And the first few steps of changing and shifting your brain will feel very out of your comfort zone. But when you are over the first few steps, you will realize that this is the road where no one gets lost, not even the fools. Like, this is the way where you can walk, and this is something that is so easy. Do you know how much striving and effort do you put into thinking negatively and destroying yourself? When you are out of it, you realize that how much time and attention did I invest into destroying myself with thinking those devastating lies, and how easy it is now to just have the thoughts, the positive thoughts my brain is actually wired for. So chill out. You are wired for positive spirals and good thinking patterns. And even if the first few steps of deciding to react differently than what you are used to may feel hard, I promise once you get used to this positive thinking, more than positive thinking, this way of changing your mind and renewing the mind, then you will feel so liberated, because you will feel that that's the real me. Like, these are the thoughts I always wanted to think about, and this is the real me. This is how I feel good in my skin. Yes, so be encouraged, because these thinking patterns can be shifted and will shift in your lives. And when you realize that they are activated, you can stop and say and teach yourself to think differently. Like, oh, I always reacted with fleeing away from people because I somehow learned as a child that I had to be afraid of them. But now that I know that I'm free, I can actually come after them and greet them, not because it feels comfortable. I can do that because it's the truth, and I will react based on the truth right until it becomes more natural to me than the destructive behaviors that I am used to. We will continue with my teenage years and what God has done in those times. I can't wait to share with you some more tools Holy Spirit has taught me in that season, and I believe that what God has done for me on this way out will also happen to you, and I'm really excited about you. Have a great way out. Köszönöm, hogy megnézted ezt a videót, remélem, hogy áldás volt számodra és kaptál belőle. Ez a képzés teljesen ingyenes, a forgatásnak, gyártásnak vannak költségei. Ha ezt reálisan valaha végig gondolnám, akkor azt mondanám, hogy ez olyan 15 000 forint per fő, per képzés áron tudna igazán jól működni. Nyilván ez egy sok részes sorozat lesz. Ugyanakkor szeretném, hogyha mindenkinek elérhető lenne, és lehető legjobb minőségbe keringene itt a YouTube-on, úgyhogy arra bátorítalak, hogy amennyire indítást érzel, olyan mértékben járulj hozzá ennek a költségeihez. Minden elérhetőség és támogatási lehetőség a leírásban lesz elérhető.